Welcome to the Wayne Bennett Podcast, celebrating West Virginia's people, places, and the culture of Southern Appalachia. Now here's your host, Wayne Bennett.
Welcome to Wayne Bennett's podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Bennett, and this is episode 182. It's actually March the 14th, 2026, and the day before the Ides of March, which was not good news for Julius Caesar, and it was a few days before St. Patty's Day. Our guest today is a former wrestler and coach at Shady Spring High School, and he's also one of the newest members of the Raleigh County Wrestling Hall of Fame. Thank you for stopping by, Larry Ransom.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invite.
I'm sure people that live in the Shady Spring area that've been there for a while are familiar with the Ransom market name. Are you related to those people?
Yeah, so my grandfather, he died in the war, Dale Ransom. He was the brother of Charlie Ransom, who started that market. And Charlie's boy was Frank, who ran it. Probably for most people around today would know. So
I can remember back when I used to deer hunt, they would drop deer off there to process it and those kind of things. They did a little bit of everything back in those days.
yeah, they had a full-fledged butcher shop there. They'd even do people's cows if they brought them in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and of course he sold it too. So, but yeah, I remember going on trips sometimes early in the morning with Frank to Racine, Ohio, or down in North Carolina and getting tomatoes and different things, peaches, and we'd bring them back in his vans, and help him set it up in the store, just do it here and there when I had time or he needed help.
Now, what's there now where the market was?
Newport Trading. They bought
Okay.
it. Yeah, they bought it years back. He's a contractor.
Yeah. Now, did you live in Beaver?
Yeah, I live there now.
Still
Yeah.
live there?
Mm-hmm.
Not in the home place?
Actually, yeah. So I went to Marine Corps. Worked on C-130s for about 10 years, airplanes. I was a hydraulic and airframe mechanic. And got stationed in California, out of schools and stuff. And then the Gulf War broke out, so they moved me to Japan for a year. So I went over to Japan and we flew support missions. Our aircraft, they just was cargo and aerial refueling. So, and then I got orders from Japan to 4th Marine Air Wing, Stewart Air National Guard Air Base in Newburgh, New York. And I told them I didn't even know the Marines had a 4th Marine Air Wing because the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd was active duty. 4th Marine Air Wing was a reserve, but even though it had active duty there for the full-time component, the reservists would come in on the weekend. So I ended up getting stationed in New York, and up there I switched over from active duty to active reserve, it was called. Same exact thing, different pot of money. They said the promotions were better, but they were about parallel, it ended up being. So, and then I was getting orders. I was selected for an E6. I was getting orders to Dallas, Fort Worth. My monitor called me. They were people who kept track of staff NCOs. And he said, "We got to move you. You've been in New York too long." And I said, "Well, I'm going to go out and look at it." My wife and I went out. I had a couple kids at that time, and they were young, would have been in elementary. And we just wasn't happy with that environment, so I got out. And up there, I started a company. And anyway, my dad died back here in 2004. We never had intentions of moving back here. She was from New Jersey, and that's where we started our family and everything. And so we moved back here, and I built a house on the same property near my mom. We actually tried to buy property, and it was a long story. It had a problem with the deed. And so we ended up building there and, to be near my mom and help her. And so that's where we ended up settling down at.
Is your mom still alive?
No, she passed away 4 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Now, what kind of work did your dad do when?
So he did drywall, him and my uncle. And he did it for like 43 years.
Oh, okay.
And he told me one time, he said, "Boy, if I ain't never told you anything smart, don't ever do this for a living." I said, "Right on," because
good advice.
I did some summer work with him through the high schools, or through my high school years, and I was like, "Nah, I don't think I want to do this."
Well, I don't know about drywall, but I used to do concrete work in the summertime with even when I was in high school and in college, and I knew I didn't want to do that all my life.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
there was no easy job in that particular line of work, and I said, you don't see any old concrete finishers or
No.
anything. They might become a boss or something. But now when you were growing up, did you play sports as a youth?
Yeah, I played Little League Baseball. I played basketball at Beaver Elementary, 3rd through 6th grade. That's back when we went all the way to 6th. When I got to junior high, at Old Shady Junior High, a lot of my friends were wrestling. The Gravely brothers. I didn't really know the McMillans at that point, because we'd all went to different elementary schools. But yeah, there was a few of them. So during the tryouts at junior high, Coach Reif, Babe Reif, was the coach back then, and I don't know if I'd have made it anyway, but I was decent. And all my buddies were up on the stage because that's where they practiced back then, was on the stage in the gymnasium, and I'd be over there watching them and doing layups and jump shots and set shots, and I'm like, so I went to Coach Reif like the 3rd day of tryouts. We had 3-day tryouts, and I said, "Hey, Coach, I think." Dave Wills might have still been coaching. I can't remember that year. But I said, "Hey, Coach, I think I'm going to wrestle." And he kind of stepped back and looked at me, and he carried that wiffle ball bat around. He whacked me upside of the shoulder or head or something, and said, "Get up there, Ransom. You wasn't no basketball player anyway." So off I went. I went to wrestling practice. And
Well,
that's when,
Bonnell was in there.
yes, so I think Coach Wills, I think that might have been his last year
Yeah.
that I went up there. And the next year, we didn't have a coach, so they were talking about doing away with the wrestling program. So we talked Coach Bonnell, he was our shop teacher, into going up there. We're like, "Hey, we need somebody. You don't even have to know what you're doing. We just need somebody to coach the team," because we were decent then. Just had some tough old guys too. And he sure did. He stepped up and came and coached for us. So.
Yeah, he had some good wrestlers during that time. That's when I came. I think when I came along coaching at Park, Wills might have was quitting or just
Yeah.
may lasted 1 year or so. I didn't coach against him much. Mainly Bonnell and then later Carter and some of those guys. But yeah, so you talk about Little League baseball. It's kind of funny. Shady's got so many kids that are interested in playing Little League baseball, and they don't even have a field now.
Right.
And they play in Beckley, and it's sad because there's no. They've probably got enough support to where if they could find some land to build a Little League field, that they probably got enough support where they have the money to do it, but. There's nobody wants to sell land out there that would be accommodable.
Interesting enough, a few years back when my kids were in Little League, I coached there too. And I never was into that side of it really deep. It was just secondhand word, so you can't hold me to accuracy on it. But I think then Dave McCormick had actually offered the Little League some property, but there was a timeline on it for some reason, and I can't remember what it was. And we kept trying to spur them and say, "Hey, we need to do this, get this done," and then it never happened, and then that time went away,
Yeah. It's kind of like and they're playing out of Beckley Little League now, and how they handle Beckley and Shady handle all that, I don't know. And Beckley's kind of in a dilemma too, because that's kind of a catch-all water thing, and they've had a lot of water issues there. They'd love to move the stadium somewhere else, but now it's become more of a money thing too. I've heard that property's been offered to them out there close to the soccer fields,
Gotcha.
But it would cost so much money to build there. So it's kind of a catch-22. So Bonnell was your coach the last couple of years there, and you came along a pretty good group of wrestlers when you was a sophomore. You guys won the state championship, didn't you?
Yeah.
And that was a pretty tough bunch of guys, man.
Yeah, we had. Just rattling some names. It was I think Drew Skeens, Jimmy Meja, Shrewsbury, Daryl, Kenny. It was a tough room. You go in there and
Who did you work out with most of the time?
mostly Kenny.
Uh,
Yeah, I was kind of little back when I first got up there, and I got in there, and uh, I was taking beatings every day. I'd come home, I knew it and felt it, and Kenny, I think he was getting beatings for himself, as he come up through there from Denny and a couple of them. I think Rusty Blosser was one. Rusty was a bony guy, but he had a mean streak in him. He'd make you feel a cross face, or you know. And I remember one time me and Kenny, I think I'd about halfway through my sophomore season, I just kind of got fed up, and we just got up and was pushing a little bit and shoving. Next thing you know, we're locked up, flying through the double doors into our dressing room. Dix is, Snuffer's over there. But, we were good. We went right back at it, and there you go. But there's a point, I guess, that helped me a lot. I always appreciate it.
People don't understand, and coaches will figure it out.
Yeah.
I always try to get somebody's going to push you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, automatically, usually when in practice, if you've got a workout partner, a lot of times kids will run over and grab the easiest guy in the room or something. But you match them up right, and that partner is the most valuable part of your wrestling career.
Yeah, it's funny because, you go around the state even today, and a lot of times if you've got a state champion, 144, next thing you know, the 150's right there too, because that's usually his practice partner, and all across the board.
First year, Kenny actually was the only individual champion you guys had.
Yeah.
And you guys, so here you are. This is back when Shady was just a 3-year high school, which all the schools were around. And you win the state championship. The next year, you got a pretty good bunch of guys the next year, but not quite enough to win the state title as far as team. But you had 2 or 3 individual champions the next year, didn't you?
Yeah. And then I blamed that on Gary Bender. He was up with technology, and they had an excellent youth system down there at Spencer.
Yeah.
And them guys, that was Todd Kendall, and he was like 4-timer. Great House was on the upper side of that. Dave Carper, there's Saunders. It was just endless. You went through that whole lineup, and next thing you know, it's like, wow, these guys are tough. But they had came out of a good youth system,
Yeah.
And they were using advanced moves, stuff, that we wasn't exposed to. We were more traditional. That was Dix's style, and drill, muscle memory. If you get in that situation, you know exactly what to do. But then you get into some situations like, what do I do now? It's too late.
I remember Shady and Spencer and Big Creek used to wrestle a try, and they would go to Spencer one year and Shady the next year and Big Creek the next year. And I refereed I refereed at Shady and refereed at Big Creek. And that was some of the best matches. That's when Kendall and them guys, and I can remember one of them down at Big Creek. Baylor kid from Big Creek beats Kendall down there, and then Kendall beats him in the state.
Yes.
And it was and tough matches. There was but not an unsportsmanlike in the whole bunch.
No,
man. Yeah,
that's right.
Nobody. It was just guys get out there, and they was. And you're right. Bender was. I had him come down for a clinic one day when I was working at the Y, and he showed a lot of. He'd wrestled at Ashland College, and he said it was kind of weird. Here he was. He had a great high school career. He come into college, and the first college match he ever wrestled was against Bobby Douglas, who went on and won the Olympics. He said,
It's a
that was
rough
my
way to come in.
introduction to college wrestling. And Bobby Douglas just passed away this past month, and he was, I think he was the first black Olympian that the United States ever had. But he was a great person.
Now, he wasn't the one that beat Gable, was he?
No, he wasn't. He wasn't the one that beat. You mean in the only one that Gable lost? No.
I saw a story on that a while
I
back.
can't remember who that is now, but Gable followed that guy, and that guy actually wasn't a super outstanding
Yes,
wrestler.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, those. Now you, who were your closest friends growing up? You had any?
Probably the Gravely brothers, Frankie and Everett Gravely. I don't know if you remember them.
Oh, yeah.
There was three of them. James was the older one, but he didn't hang with us, and it was a neighborhood thing, And Sean Madden, he lived out our road, and we'd get out there and play some knockout grind football, backyard football, and every sport known. We had wiffle. We'd play wiffle ball. We would strip the hide off of the tennis balls and leave the rubber seams. And you could throw the nastiest breaking ball, balls, and we'd make bats. We had bats, but we'd make them out of long sticks. And if you ever got a hold of one, you'd launch it 400 feet. But yeah, we just, just all the guys. And I grew up right below Cherry Hill. So Shane Houck, Scotty Scott, Sammy Gross, Scotty Gross, his younger brother, he didn't hang with us as much, but we had, we'd go up there and get neighborhood games started. Yeah, it was competitive. I mean, we always grew up in a competitive environment.
Same type of situation. It was always some kind of game.
Mm-hmm.
We would play till you couldn't see anymore. It would be so dark.
Yeah.
Summertime. And now, a lot of people in that direction are big hunters and fishermen. Or did you ever do a lot of hunting or fishing? Or?
Not so much. I just didn't. I never took the time so much. And I guess always somewhere in the back of my mind, I guess it's the way I grew up. My dad didn't hunt much, and I always thought I don't need to go necessarily kill it unless I need it for food. And that's the one reason. And I don't hold anything against anyone for hunting by no means, because I love deer meat, but I just never, if I go shoot it, I'm definitely going to eat it, and I could care less how big the rack was. And so when I was coaching the high school, a bunch of the wrestlers, they loved hunting, So they'd always call me and say, "You want a deer?" I was like, "Absolutely." So they'd bring me a deer, or I'd go get it, and so they supplied me with deer for years. And and I'd hang them up and clean them myself. Sometimes we'd take them out to Chapman's or whatever, but I always liked cutting them and cleaning them myself because I knew what I was getting. Not that none of them are bad. It's just so no, I never did get. To this day, I get my sportsman package, but I never have time to go use it.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of in the same situation. I hunted a little bit, but then with my dad, then he got to a point he couldn't do it anymore, and so I never did pursue it. I fish a little bit, but I'm not. We have a pond at a farm we have, and you can always catch something real quick. And to sit for hours and hours and travel for miles, I'm not that avid. But in high school, you were a two-time Coalfield champion. You were a two-time regional champion. You placed in the states 3 different times. Your senior year, you got third. You actually, one of those years, you lost to Joe Harris, didn't you?
Yeah. And so I can't remember the sequence. I can't remember my senior year, I'd actually beat Dave Carper earlier in that year. Uh-huh. And Joel, I can't remember if he wrestled him earlier or not, but then at the state tournament, I ended up on Joel's side, and we met in the semis. And I think the year before I'd beat Joel somewhere, but I think he beat me like if we were keeping tabs, I think he had beat me 2 out of the 3 times we had wrestled or something like that through high school. Joel was a very good wrestler, and strong. He was very strong. They had a good weight program at the time. His dad pushed him. But yeah, that year, I can't remember if that was a year. He might have beat me earlier in the year.
Now, Joel was the WVU Tech head wrestling coach now, and he's coached at Oak Hill and Greenbrier West and a few of those areas. The Carper kid, was he from Spencer?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was. Now, as soon as you graduated from Shady, you went into the Marine Corps then?
Yes.
And you were there 10 years?
Almost 10. I went in September of 1989 and got out October, no, it was probably later that in 98. It was right at the beginning of the year. And there was a transition period. I did a 5 and a 4, so that was 9. But then I had a layover when I switched from active to AR a few months. So yeah, it was closer to 9.5 years or something.
And you had, how come you didn't stay 20 years?
Well, that's what I was telling you.
Yeah.
That I had to go to Dallas-Fort Worth if I was staying in and to select my E6. So we went out, and we didn't like back then I never knew anything about Texas. So we went out there, and we just didn't like it, and that was important for where we were in our life at that time.
And was there a lot going on in the Middle East at that time?
No, it had all calmed down by then. Yeah. I wasn't the hardcore grunt. Even though when I went to boot camp, because of wrestling, I got company Ironman. I got promoted an extra stripe out of boot camp because I had the highest PFT score in my battalion. Because what happened when you could get a 300, so you did 20 pull-ups was perfect, 80 sit-ups in 2 minutes, and a 3-mile run you had to do 18 minutes or better. Well, the guys competing for a higher score, they let them go past what they could do. So Dick's probably did this for me, but I did 42 pull-ups, so I more than doubled the pull-ups. And I had 123 sit-ups. I could do sit-ups until the end of time as fast as you could go. And then on the run, I got beat by a guy from Ethiopia. He smoked me on 3 miles. I mean, he was out of sight. But I'd beat him so bad on the other 2 that my score was a lot higher. But I think I'd got a 17-15 3-mile run. So, and I beat it one time since then.
That's pretty good.
When I I had a 373 out of 300, so they gave me the stripe, the PFC coming out. So I was always thankful for, and that's what I tell people. I actually gained weight when I went to boot camp because, you ate 3 square meals a day most of the time. And, I just never ate like that because of wrestling.
Did you take a growing spell?
Oh, yeah. I grew some. Yeah, I think I came out, I can't remember my senior year. I think I was a 135-pounder. When I come out of boot camp, I was probably 165, And I never was heavy or anything. And then I got to Japan. I still thought about wrestling, and they had a wrestling team over there, but because of the Gulf War, we were 12 on, 12 off, and I just never had to, I went to a few practices, and I'm like, I was exhausted by the time, from working and everything, so I never pursued it there. And then when I got to New York, I played on a East Coast softball team. I played on a Marine basketball team. We played at West Point a lot. We played a game during a West Point halftime game one time, just at intramurals, We played flag football, which is intense at, some people call it Mikey Stadium, some people call it Michie Stadium, but it was on West Point, so that was our league field, So, I mean, I played everything, and I loved sports, and they were intense sports. I mean, and at lunch, my boss in the Marines, he'd say if you PT, do running or anything, he said, you guys can take an extended lunch because we'd get an hour for lunch. So we'd get an hour and a half, and we'd play basketball. And you're running sprints for an hour and a half. Well, then you got your other Marines out running the base or whatever, pounding pavement, and I hated just out outright running. I hated it. I wanted to do something so we'd go play basketball. Then on the PFT, I'd smoke 'em, in the 3 mile. And they're like, man, you never run. I said, yeah, I run wind sprints an hour and a half a day. Come and join us. I just enjoy it.
When you came back to the Beckley area, what's your profession? What do you do now?
Okay, so I got out of the Marine Corps in New York, and there was a master sergeant. And I had a job as a dock supervisor at a trucking company. It was a union job. Had a great retirement. And this master sergeant kept coming down. Hey, I heard you're getting out. I need somebody to run my company. Da, da, da. I'm like, no. I said, I got something. So he eventually kept hounding me. And I said, what about health insurance? What about this and that? So he had a tree business. And I was his first full-time employee. And we grew it to 3 corporations. An excavation and demo, a landscape, and a tree business. And he separated them. And I worked for him for a few years. And I always tell people it was the best job that I ever had because I learned everything not to do at someone else's expense. Because after 4 or 5 years, we come in one day, and I knew it was coming, and there was yellow papers all over his buildings, and it was the IRS. He never paid his taxes, so they shut him down. But at that point, I had so much side work, which he promoted. He said, "Hey, Larry, this is too little for us. If you want this job or this job," and I was like, "Sure," So I'd go do them in the evenings or on the weekends. Back then, I was young enough I could do all that. So I'd started my own tree company up there. And I liked it because it was kind of ludicrous. I mean, you didn't have a lot, when you come and build this deck, you have a lot of material into it. When you go do tree work, you got your equipment, but you carry that from job to job, and you could make really good money at it. So I kind of saw that, and I said, I like this. And I was really good at climbing. He would actually farm me to other companies, like down in Westchester. We'd go do vacation homes that had $2 million landscapes. I'm like, it's people's second homes out of New York. I'm like, geez, this is crazy. But, we pruned. You climb spikeless, go up, do tree canopies, crowns, prune them, clean out all the dead wood, head back, and then you get into removals. And then eventually, anyway, so to answer your question, I had that company. And it done me well up there. And then when my dad died here, we said, well, we'll just try to relocate it and see how it goes, And I didn't think I'd do near as good. Now, I had 2 crews up there. It was pretty big. But I was nervous because I was always afraid somebody's going to get hurt. And I had a pretty good safety program. But, for people to follow, it was a different story. And then we relocated down here. I think I had 9 trips from New York with equipment and had a bucket truck, chip trucks. No, I didn't have an excavator. I had a skid steer and a few other pieces of equipment. When I got here, you'd mentioned earlier about your house building it. I did the same thing. I contracted the cars who I went to school with to drive me in on my house, and then we took over from there. But I dug my own basement and footers because I'd done that before, So, and I started my tree and excavation business here, and it took off. And I said, well, I want to stay small if I can pay my bills. So I always tried to stay small. And its name was Arbortech. And so it did well, and I started land clearing here. I did a lot of lots and like site packages in Glade Springs and Flat Top Lake, unfortunately. Everything out there is on a goat's face, It's deep. And grew it. And then a few years back, my oldest son, Zach, he worked with me in high school. He'd go out and clear land, and I had a couple other full-time employees. And I told him, I said, he graduated in 11, and I said, hey, you think you're wanting to take over this company? I said, just think about it. And when you graduate, I said, I got a really good customer base. And so when he graduated, he also worked at a farm at Dr. Rainey's. He ended up marrying his daughter down in Pipestem. He had a couple 100 acres. So between me and him, he never had any downtime. And so he was a senior, and he said, Dad, I think I'm going to go ahead and go to college. And that's kind of what happened with me. My dad, I'd go work with him on drywall in the summers, and then I could get a taste of it to know if I wanted to do it or not. And Zach said, I'm going to go on to college. And I said, all right, fair enough. So I started shutting my business down slowly and looking for things to do. And I had a CDL for many years, so I drove a route for FedEx from Greensboro to Beckley at nighttime. Doubles, pulling their doubles for them. And then I still had my own work. And I used to do containers in the winter for winter work because my business was very seasonal. And for John Potee, MCS, I was a sub for him. So I'd go in and do container repairs and stuff. And, it was nice to be indoors for the winter. So I did some more of that. And then the operators, the pipeline came through, and I was like, ooh. And so they called or had said, hey, we're looking for operators. And I'm like, well, I can operate. I got excavator skids here. So I got on the pipeline, and that was over in the operating engineers. And they put me over in Muddlety. There was a pipe yard over there right outside of Summersville, and there was a younger guy. And he had been non-union, traveling the country, doing pipeline. He was in his 20s. And I was his helper, oiler they called it. And he started showing me they had a pipe vac, and that machine would suction the pipe. And we're talking, 14, 15,000 pound pieces of pipe. And that's how you loaded the trucks. It would come down on him. That way you're not putting anything around it and scabbing the coating up. And then you sit there and you put 3 on a truck, and they'd take it out to the pipeline. It's called stringing, and they'd lay it on cribbing going up around the ditch. Then they'd set it in, weld it up, and set big sections in and whatnot. And so I was over there in that yard, and it was funny because they shut down several times because of the protesters. But I was like one of the few guys, for somehow I missed all the shutdowns, and they just keep me at that yard. So I'd be over there. I had an ISO mat, and I'd be doing sit-ups and jogging around the yard and stuff, trying to because it was the easiest job I'd ever had. And I'm like, honey, this is going to kill me. So I'd go over there and do a bunch of exercises and then finally it picked back up, and I was busy more, and we were loading out. Well, then that job ended, and it shut down right around Christmas. And it was 611s, 612s. All the time, so I was like, thank goodness. But it was crazy money. I think that year I'd made $160,000 or something. So I got a call in January for my CDL, and it was still in the operators, and they said, you want to come and drive a truck for this company called Triton. And they had just started the Beckley widening, and their yard was in Mabscott at the Mabscott exit in the big loop. And I said, yeah, I'll try that, Well, the heavy highway, that was what that was considered versus the pipeline. The money was quite a bit less, but I was like, well, that's plenty of money for what I need. I've never been the type to have to try to have all the money, So I got over there and started running the truck for them, and I was running the low drag. And there was days I'd do 10, 15 dropping hooks, so that's 20 because you go pick a hoe up, take it down the road a mile on the job, drop it. That's one, So if you do 10 or 15, I was busy. I'd be there 7, 8 o'clock when everybody else was long gone at 5:30 and stuff. And I guess Triton appreciated that. And then I guess the theme I got is, out of high school, I worked on airplanes. I had a good GT score and, to get into the aircraft side. Well, on my ASVAB. But I like learning. And when I was in the Marine Corps, I worked on airplanes and then I cross-trained to the engine shop. And then they finally put me in maintenance control, and you coordinate with the flight guys. And now you got all your work centers, like 13, 14 of them. And they're all your parachute shop, your avionics, your engine shop, your survival shop. So I'm coordinating amongst all them, and I'm liking that. So I did that for a couple of years and then decided to get out, but I always like to learn. Even to this day, I love to learn, So when I got, that's why I enjoy trees, because I was learning how to you could do a maple tree here and go down the road and do one that's totally different. But then after 10,000 of them, they all start blending together. So then I got into the heavy highway and the pipeline, and I enjoyed that side of it. And then they built bridges, did road work, and I'd been around a lot of that stuff, but never right in it. So I'm sitting here watching all the time as I'm dropping equipment. If I didn't have something to go pick up, I'd be helping a bridge crew just because I like to stay busy. Well, so then Triton, eventually, we got that job close to done, and then I heard a couple people mention, hey man, you might be getting moved up. I'm like, for what? So they asked me, they said, hey, do you want to do a bridge? And I said, absolutely, sure, I'll give it a try. And they said, well, it's down at Bartley Bottom in McDowell County. And I'm like, well, shoot, I understand. Put me down where it don't matter, It sounds good to me. So we went down there, and they rented us a place in Welch we stayed at. And so I'm like, well, if I'm going to be out of town, I'd rather just work 4 12s, because their schedule usually was 4 10s and an 8. I'd just rather work 4 12s and get 3 days off, So we went down there and we did really good on that bridge. And it went across the river for like 6 or 7 houses. It was a $2 million bridge, and you could have bought all the houses there for $700,000-800,000. We just didn't. But there was also a railroad, so a little access. But so we built that bridge, and then they said, well, okay, you did good. And they really don't tell you a lot. You just assume people don't communicate real good as you want to. But so then they said they moved me up here to Stanford Road to the 2 bridges right by R.T. Rogers. And they said, well, here's your next one. So tear it up. So now that was the first bridge we had done like that. It was a unique bridge, and it was basically landscape block. And that bridge system was designed in third world countries where you couldn't get large equipment and mass amounts of concrete. And I know that because a man stopped who said he designed it and left me his card one time. And, so he gave me a little education on it. But what happened, we started that project, and the block here at Peerless wouldn't pass the 100-day test for the state. It was freeze thaw and a couple things they did. So we had to get block out of like North Dakota or Minnesota or somewhere. So we had to tractor. It was a ridiculous amount of block. I think it was 17,000 block for both bridges. And you could get like 400 block per load because of weight or something, however it was. So you can imagine dividing that up. We got block all the time, And we had mountains of number 8 stone. It's like the fine gravel, almost like a cinder that they put down. And you had to put it in layers and compact it and wrap it in geotextile fabric. There was just so much to do on the bridges, and then stack the block. And the block wasn't perfect, and you had to grind it, and you had to shoot your elevations on every course. And then they expected it to settle, so there is a slight dip in there. And we got monitors on the wall, and the state's supposed to come and check that annually and see how much the bridge drops. And it was interesting, So we got that done, and then they said, all right, now you're going to the plaza. And it was the Beckley Travel Plaza at the Tamarack. And over there, we ended up doing, it was like 6,000. We hired a company to bring in a concrete batch plant, and they set up behind Matheny's on Dry Hill Road, and we made our own concrete for that plaza and the Bluestone Plaza. Well, I got stuck dealing with that plant, to trucking, and my job. So anyway, we had like 6,000 dump truck loads of concrete between the both of them that we ended up making there, and so that plaza turned out really nice. And then my last job I was doing 2 bridges in White Sulphur on 64 over railroad tracks.
Now, do you have to know the technology the strength of concrete and all that? You have to...
Oh, yeah. So you mentioned you had done some concrete work. So, in the union, we're union, and we have operating engineers who run your equipment. We've got the finishers, concrete finishers union, so that's all they do. We've got carpenters, we've got laborers, we've got all these different that we use.
Steel workers?
Iron workers. We don't use the steel workers, but we use the iron workers.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. And so now certain things I don't need to know, but the more you know, the better in a lot of cases, So yes, so the state has specs for everything. And it's spec crazy. Just like when I was in the Marine Corps, it was, you can endlessly just go into policy letters. But so like for your concrete, you've got certain classes. You got a Class B, a Class H, a Class K. Like, so your concrete coming out of the ground is a Class B, and it's got a 3,000 pound mix, and you got a way you got to cure it. It's got a wet cure. You got to put burlap on it, and you got to, you take breaks. So we fill cylinders when we pour it. These plastic cylinders, they get sent to Alliance, Thrasher, whoever, and they have this machine that breaks it and tells you the strength of it. In 7 days, you can get early breaks. You're allowed to strip forms after a 3-day break if you get 80% of strength. There's just so much to do there. And then as you get up higher towards your bridge decks and your parapet walls, you've got Class H and Class K. They go all the way up to 5,000, 5,500 PSI and so on. And then all your steel, your iron comes, your new girders. So you got cranes coming in, and like we just had a 550-ton crane. It had 352,000 pounds of counterweight on it. This crane comes in with 18 tractor trailer loads to demo the old bridge that had concrete girders, and then we're replacing them with steel girders. Wow. But yeah, there's a lot. I enjoy it, but it can get overwhelming.
I just on the highway, driving down through Glen Morgan and looking at the piers coming out of Glen Morgan,
where they painted it.
I'm so impressed, man. It's amazing what people can do.
Oh, it's scary.
But then you think about when you start. I mean, when I look at houses, old houses mainly, but when I look at houses, I go around and look at the construction and what these guys have done in the past, and then I think about the tools that they had.
Yes,
and it's so impressive, And then you can even go farther back in the pyramids, and you just can't imagine what humans are capable of building.
And we're in a society now. I think we consider technology things that make our job easier, but it could be at whatever expense. For me, I would define technology as something that's more cost effective and can help you do your job better and easier. But the cost effective part has been long gone.
Yeah.
Now they come out with all this stuff, but it costs the same as your house. And it's like, okay, why don't you do something different? Come up with something that can do that people can afford.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the tree business, and I've never been a climber or anything like that, but I've had trees that were trimmed and cut down, and I used to drop a few trees myself that would, how in the world didn't kill somebody or tear up something. Yeah. I don't know, but some of these guys that used to climb, and I have an uncle who's 80 years old now, they may be 81, and still cuts trees down, and he's got a crew. But now they get a little more. They got the buckets and those kind of things. Back in the old days, they didn't have that stuff. But one particular time, I had a crew trimming some trees behind my house, and they had this one guy, and he was all over the place, man. I mean, he was great. He was worth just sitting there and watching all day. And so the next day, he doesn't come. He doesn't show up, and the crew shows up. And the guy who owned the company, he was about 70, 71, 72, and he said, well, he probably got drunk last night. He said he drinks a lot, but he said he's one of the best climbers we've ever had. But he said, I said, well, what are you going to do? And he said, well, I'll do it myself. And he climbs. This guy's 70-some years old. He climbs up there, and they finish the job. And he said, I don't like to do this as much, but but those guys are fearless.
Yeah, and through the years, I always said, most climbers and good climbers, and it's with other trades too. People who it's very nerve-wracking, and you can never get complacent, because if you do, you're probably going to have a bad day. And you have to go through each step, make sure you're clear, because you can have a rigging block here, and be cutting the top out of a tree, and it's right below your cut. And I pre-cut my box or wedge, whatever people want to call it, and then you run your rigging rope right up in front of that through your block, your pulley, and you make a tie up here, run a bow line, and you can throw a half inch behind it or whatever. Well, then your rope holding that whole top is right in the front, and then you back cut and the top hinges over. And we got friction devices we used to tie around a tree at the bottom, and it was like a porta wrap, and it's like a pipe with nubs, but somebody made it and patented it. And like you can put a half wrap on it for a smaller limb or a full wrap. You could lower a Volkswagen with 3 wraps. It'll hold 2,000 pounds as long as your rope in the tree would hold it. Well, and that way it keeps the guy from burning his hands up, or they used to wrap it around the base of the tree and eat your ropes up. Well, if you get complacent right there and you're cutting, and you cut your rigging rope and you're rigging over a house or something, it's gone. and your lifeline, your flip line's right here because you just took out your overhead rigging points. So, you got to be very careful with all that. So most climbers, they were usually on something of some sort for their nerves, alcohol, drugs. And I told everybody I was on faith, and I was, I believe, I was saved. I'm like, good Lord's ready for me. He'll let me cut my rope when I want to. So
it's amazing, man. It's hard work.
It is.
Even with the equipment, it's still hard work.
Well, and so I was still climbing and coaching high school wrestling. So I'd go in there and these guys be lifting weights and stuff, and I'd throw these boys around like they was, how are you so strong? I said, it's called man strength. When you go out and climb trees all day, you're pulling yourself up. And then like Flat Top Lake, where everything's on a hillside, you can't get no equipment to it. You got to cut all the logs and roll them up. I had a winch on my chipper. We would rig it and use it in wagon sometimes. But, it's just, it'll make a man real quick.
Well, strength is the ability to do work.
Yeah.
These guys they waste all that strength in the gym.
Just
pushing up something and you don't get any. You might get a
no production,
but you don't make any money out of it. But now you had so you were coaching. You volunteered for a while at Shady.
Yeah.
Your oldest son Zach wrestled. Your other son didn't wrestle, did he?
Yeah, he wrestled 2 years. He wrestled. He didn't. He decided he didn't want to wrestle. Tucker.
Okay, Tucker.
Yeah. He decided he didn't want to wrestle in 6th or 7th grade. And then he had some buddies that were wrestling in 8th grade. So he said, Dad, I do think, even though to this day, we have a wrestling mat and room in my basement. So he still grew up around it, Yeah. So he started wrestling in 8th grade. And, he wasn't very good. But I was like, hey, whatever. I'm not one of them dads that, hey, you got to be the best, da-da-da-da. I said, this is something we can do together. My oldest son, Zach, and we had a great relationship going to tournaments and, staying in hotel rooms and just spending time together, So I was like, it's a great opportunity. So then Tucker got to high school and he enjoyed it. And he was doing pretty good, but he was also snowboarding and he really loved that. And, winter sports. So he got to 10th grade and I felt his heart wasn't all the way in it. And I was like, I hate to give a way out, but I thought maybe he needed it, and I just said, hey, Tuck, I said, I don't want you wrestling for me. I said, I want you to be here. I want you to enjoy it, and if it's something you're not wholeheartedly enjoying, I feel like, because sometimes some of his other friends who didn't wrestle, they'd be going snowboarding or something, and he's at a wrestling tournament Saturday morning, and I could tell it. And so he said, after his 10th grade year, he said, Dad, he goes, I want to work to make some money and save up for a car. Because all of my kids, I got 2 girls and 2 boys, I got 4. All of my kids, my wife and I, we just passed 33 years married, but we always felt that handouts can be destructive. And so all of our kids, we made an agreement that you save money, and when you're ready to buy a car, we'll find you something $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, whatever you have to pay half. We'll match you half. And then we expect you to even pay that part back, but it can be in payments or however you're working, And we did that with all of our kids. And it worked out. Now, Kelly, my youngest daughter, she's 24 now. She kind of got lucky because hers was during COVID, and she had got one of their whatever checks that they were giving out, so it boosted her savings up enough that, it helped her match a car. So we did that with all of our kids, and Tucker was like, okay, well, I ain't gonna have a car unless I start working. So he actually worked at Winter Place, got him a free lift pass, and he got paid, and then he had another job at Dairy Queen and Beaver, and, but he's worked the whole time. And so I was like, that's fine by me, And plus with my job, I wasn't being able to be there a lot. So, I couldn't support him like I wanted to, but, he could have still wrestled. It was just like, I liked being a big part of it too.
I mean, is Zach the only one that went to college?
Well, Tucker's going to Tech now.
Yeah,
my two daughters didn't. Yeah, sorry. So my oldest daughter, Molly, she has my 3 grandbabies. And years ago, my grandpa owned all the property up around where we live. And when he died in the war, my grandma inherited it. And it was on the other side of the family, on Charlie Ransom's side. And they wasn't big fans of my grandmother. So my grandmother moved away for many years. But the old homestead was still there, where my mom was. And so years went by, and my grandmother decided to divvy it up amongst her kids. My dad was the oldest, his brother, my aunt, and then they had a younger half-brother. So she divvied it up amongst all them. And through the years, my aunt had married a guy, and he built houses. Well, he had built 3 or 4 houses on their property, and it was kind of a stepping stone for him. He had bought and sold them, and then they moved on to other things. And they had a ski place out there in Shady Springs storage and stuff, mini rentals and stuff. But anyway, so one of the houses he had built came up beside us, our property for sale, and my daughter and son-in-law were able to buy it. And it needed quite a bit of work, so we did all that together. Well, I had got him a job with Triton, the company I work for. He's a carpenter. So he's a carpenter for us, and my daughter married him, and they started a family there, which is very convenient for us because we love our grandbabies. So then my youngest daughter, Kelly, she went to the University of Charleston, and now I'm embarrassed, but I can't remember. She's going to maybe back to the University of Charleston. She's in a rad tech program now. Originally, she had done another program. It was kind of a waste of money, but she had graduated and basically still couldn't get a job. So now she's doing that. And her fiance is a laborer for us. He does concrete testing and surveying. He runs a rover. It's a satellite base. And then Tucker, he's going to Tech. My oldest son's a dentist, and Tucker wants to be a dentist too. He works at Liberty Dental as a dental assistant right now while he's going to Tech.
You get free dental work?
Oh, no, it's insane. I do not, and I need plenty of it.
Well, what about you took over as a head coach at Shady. How did that come about?
So Danny Carter was the coach when we moved back here, and I'd started going to Tucker's practices in the junior high, middle school when Matt Huffman was coaching. And I'd just help out on the side, and just support him. And I'd got certified because he came out with that. And then when Zach moved up to high school, Danny, I'd wrestled with Danny and Jeff a little bit, and Danny, he was like, yeah, man, I'll take all the help I can get, So I was like, all right, cool. So I went in and started, Sonny Hare and Walter Patton, all them kids were in there at the time, And so I'd go in and work with them guys, And we did that, quite a ways up. And that was like 07, 08, I guess. And then, so I was a volunteer assistant officially, I guess you could say. And then I think Danny said, okay, I'm going to bow out. And Jeff took over it, and I was Jeff's assistant, and we did that for a couple years. And then, I'm sure, I don't know if you've had Jeff on here, but he went through a divorce, and his life had kind of changed, and he had a place in Princeton, so he kind of pulled back, and he said, Larry, I don't think I'm going to be able to coach. So, and so I was like, no problem. So then I took over it, I necessarily didn't want to because I'm not a big fan of the paperwork side of things. I had plenty of that through the years. I loved being there with the sport. And then Derek Scarborough, his boy Shane had come up, and so I was like, yeah, Derek obviously knows wrestling. So, and I knew Derek because he had grew up where I live, where I grew up. So the Thompson boys, they grew up around the road. Their dad, I'm, his age. He's a few years ahead of me. And then the Stumps, Dean, his brothers, Bobby, and actually one of them won the states. The one I can't think of. Brad, yeah. Brad, they all grew up around my road. So yeah, going back to childhood, we were all back in there doing, and so yeah, ultimately that's where that was. As far as Derek, he was coming up, Shane was coming up, and he brought a good element to the room. He could get that competitiveness out of the kids, and he'd get up in their face and challenge them, not in an aggressive way, but come on, big boy, and then he'd get them spooled up. So, and then, my life was changing, and that's where I'd start switching jobs, and I think I'd got on the pipeline, and it was 6 12-hour, 11-hour days, and I'm like, Derek, I ain't gonna be able to do this, I'm gonna run with this and see where it goes, and then, so if you can go ahead and take over. And then he took over, and I think he only was able to do it a year, and then Anthony Shrewsbury was jumping in to help it. So we had a few years of quick in and outs right there, but it was just life events kind of dictating
well, it's
that.
tough. It's tough too. I could have never imagined coaching and not been in the school, because I was always in the school that I coached at. And it was tough enough anyway, but not being there, and you just kind of got to show up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, and whoever shows up, you just don't know the whole story if they don't show up, and you lose some kids to attrition. If you don't get them right after school, once they get home, sometimes they don't come back, and it just makes it. But that's more the norm now than ever before, because you can't find any coaches in the system or any people that want to coach, and it's going to get more difficult. I don't know how it's going to work out. What do you think about the transfer rule now? Yesterday the Senate passed to maybe go back to the old way, not allowing transfers. But it hasn't been signed by the governor. What do you think about this?
I don't have a huge position on that, because the way I look at that is I hate to beat our school systems up, but when Zach, my oldest son, was in New York, he would constantly come home, and he had good grades, but he would also have notes that said, Zach is great at this and this, needs work in this. And he was constantly needing work in things. So then we moved back to West Virginia. He has straight A's through high school, never brings a book home. But then when he gets to college, he's like, oh my gosh. So I feel our schools don't, I'm going somewhere with this. I feel our schools don't prepare us for, in the area we were in New York, they had very good college rates. Once the students got to college, they had very good statistics, about them excelling through college. Here, and, I have kids to prove it too. When they get to college, they're like, oh, wow, we're not ready for this. They don't have the good study habits. They don't have the good this and that. So I guess what I'm trying to say in relation to the transfer rule, you've got the college portals now. So in one aspect, I feel it could be good for these kids, because when they get there, they know the system. It could be some type of prep for them as far as transferring back and forth between schools. Some kids are more conservative. They like to be around an environment they know, and then you take other kids, that you couldn't convince. There's absolutely no way I could take my oldest daughter and tell her she's transferring to a new school. She just quit life. I'm done. She's an introvert, So some kids, they just can't be around that. But it adds an element to the sport. And I guess in some ways that can be a good thing, but I'm the type, I guess I feel like if you're going to grow up in but I don't know, it's just such a broad environment we're in these days.
Yeah.
When we were growing up, everybody was from around here. You get an outsider that moves in, and that's okay, and it takes a while to adjust. But these days, everybody's everywhere. So I don't know. I don't really have a position on it.
Yeah. Sure that they'll ever get a handle on it as far as sports are concerned. Even if it goes back to the old rule, the people who, be honest with you, the people who have money, they'll still be able to do they'll
Absolutely.
buy a house over here, or
Yep.
they'll move
Just for the
where they want
residency
to.
rule.
And
Absolutely.
it probably hurt was maybe some of the poor kids or the medium families, but so I don't know. I'm not sure they'll ever be able. As far as education is concerned, I'm a former educator, and I totally agree. I think the education system ought to be totally changed. But that's an elephant in the room
Yes.
nobody's going to tackle.
So far to go with that.
And I mean, you're talking about from the top to the bottom, and it doesn't take away that there are some excellent teachers out
Right.
there. But sometimes the bureaucracy and the system won't let them teach,
Right.
and it's sad. And I don't. In my lifetime, I don't think it's ever going to be approached and tackled. Now they've got changes where people were homeschooling and charter schools and stuff, but a lot of those have hidden agendas. There's people that are trying to make money off of it, charter schools and private schools. There's a lot of people that are homeschooling that are definitely not qualified to be homeschooling. There's some that do a great job.
I agree.
But there's some that should not, but they're doing it for the little bit of money that they may be getting from Hope Scholarship or whatever.
Right.
So it's crazy. But you brought up some good points. Well, I appreciate you, Larry, stopping by, man. I've really enjoyed talking with you, and I want to congratulate you for being put in the Raleigh County Wrestling Hall of Fame. Your name came up. It was a unanimous vote, and the time that you've put in, the things you've done, you still volunteer whenever you can, and it takes a village to run a wrestling program. It takes a lot of help, and people don't realize that you got a basketball tournament. You throw you got two scores out there. In wrestling, you have a wrestling tournament. You got to have 8 to 10 or 12 scores, and it's. It move mats and
Yeah.
everything else. It's a different world. But congratulations, and
thank you.
I want to thank you for stopping by and talking to me.
Well, thank you, Wayne. And like I said before to you when I talked to you on the phone, appreciate what you do for the sport itself. Just by doing this, and it's you're kind of a pioneer of bringing it into our area, and that's greatly appreciated. I've learned this more recently than before, and I know you had the youth programs, and you're keeping it going by just doing these things and other sports too, So.
It's been a labor of love. We've had this Hall of Fame thing. We had the tournament. The first Hall of Fame tournament we had was at Shady Spring High School, and I called Dick's, and I said, I'd like to have it out there, and you guys can keep the concession, and we'll pay you janitors, whatever. And it was the first age group tournament in West Virginia.
Oh, wow.
And we didn't have the internet back then.
Right.
We just passed the word. And we had 400 people. And they came from everywhere. And we had an open class that, these old guys come in and
that was the bomb.
and so then, the next year it was just as big. And then all of a sudden, everybody started having age group tournaments, and it was good. But it was the Hall of Fame, and the Southern West Virginia Board of Officials are the ones that started it, And Guy Holiday now is doing a great job with those guys. He's got that built back up, and it's the largest
In the
referees
state.
board in the state now, and and those guys. I mean, I've watched them. I mean, they do a good job.
I
And
was an official for a couple of years.
I remember
Yeah,
that. I
yeah,
remember
and
that.
that's a good board. I mean,
Yeah.
we had classes. We'd go over to Oak Hill and work in their gym and go over everything, all the cases. It was good.
And I'm glad. I mean, Guy wrestled for me, and
Yeah.
I'm glad to see him. He refereed at the states this year, and I'm glad he's still doing it. And that's what it takes. Like I said, and whenever you get a chance, give it back.
Yeah, that's
get
right.
back into it. And but I thank you. And anybody else out there who'd like to be on our podcast, you can contact me at awbennett50@gmail.com, and we'll get you on here. And remember, if you're not dead yet, you're not done yet. And we appreciate you, and God bless you.